This video was made possible thanks to CuriosityStream. Watch TLDR ad-free and get exclusive videos from us by signing up to the CuriosityStream Nebula bundle deal at curiositystream.com/TLDREU. We're now going into the third week of war in Ukraine, and things don't seem to be slowing down. In the background though, Russian and Ukrainian officials have been trying to negotiate the end of the conflict. But as you probably can tell from the fact that the Russian army is still bearing down on Kyiv, little progress has actually been made, and a gruesome and violent battle for the capital of Ukraine now looks pretty much inevitable. So we thought it would be a good idea to do a video looking at why the two sides have been unable to agree on a deal, what a hypothetical deal might look like, and who it might involve. Before we begin, currently only about a quarter of you are subscribed to the channel, so never miss a thing in this difficult time by subscribing and joining the TLDR gang. We're going to split this video into three parts. Firstly, we're going to look at the prospect of a ceasefire. Secondly, we're going to take a look at what a negotiated settlement between Russia and Ukraine might look like. And thirdly, we're going to examine how any agreement could actually be enforced. So let's start with a ceasefire. Any negotiated end to this conflict will probably first require a ceasefire. Then, once the fighting stopped, they can start talking about a deal that would mark the end of the war officially. So, what are the prospects of a provisional ceasefire? Well, at the moment, they're not great. Russian and Ukrainian officials have been holding talks near the Belarusian border since February 28th, and on Thursday, Russia's foreign minister and his Ukrainian counterpart met for the first high-level official talks between the two sides to discuss ceasefire conditions and humanitarian corridors. Neither negotiation has yielded any progress though, and Russia's approach to humanitarian corridors doesn't bode well for the future ceasefire negotiations. Last week, Russian forces fired on civilians leaving via these humanitarian corridors, and Ukraine reported that Russian forces have destroyed buses for civilian evacuation and mined roads which were being used to bring food and medicine into Mariupol, which is currently under siege by Russia. When Russia proposed new humanitarian corridors later in the week, most of the proposed corridors led either to Belarus or to Russia, which prompted Macron to accuse Vladimir Putin of moral and political cynicism. In some sense, this shouldn't be too surprising though. The Russian army had a history of targeting healthcare and civilian facilities in Syria, regularly violating the UN's no-strike list. So it shouldn't be too much of a surprise that they're doing so again. Another reason we might be pessimistic about the prospects of a ceasefire anytime soon, though, is the fact that in the 8 years this war has been going on, ceasefires have proved ineffective. Since Russian-backed separatists took over control of Donbass in 2014, there have been 29 ceasefires, each intended to remain in force indefinitely, but none of them have lasted. But perhaps the overriding reason why ceasefire looks unlikely at the moment is because it would probably benefit the Russian army. As we've detailed in other videos, the Russian army have been beset with logistical problems. A ceasefire would just give them a chance to regroup and resupply, and the Ukrainians presumably know this, and given the lack of trust between the two sides, they'll be unlikely to agree to a ceasefire as long as the Russians are struggling logistically. So, you get the point. A ceasefire looks unlikely at the moment. But let's imagine that a ceasefire is agreed, and the two sides finally get round a negotiating table. What then? What would a negotiated settlement actually look like? Well, again, it's hard to see how Putin and Zelensky could form an agreement. When Putin first announced his, quote, special military invasion in Ukraine, he said it was his intention to denazify and demilitarize Ukraine. In practice, this seemed to mean deposing Zelensky and somehow getting rid of Ukraine's armed forces. And while he didn't mention it explicitly, Putin also wanted guarantees about Ukraine's neutrality. In other words, Putin wanted guarantees that Ukraine wouldn't join NATO. But as you might expect, Zelensky wasn't particularly keen on any of these proposals. Obviously, he wasn't going to step down or allow for the, quote, demilitarization of a sovereign Ukraine. And similarly, Zelensky originally insisted that Ukraine had the absolute right to decide its own foreign policy. Now, since then, both sides have softened somewhat. On March 7th, a Kremlin spokesperson said that Russia had 4 demands: that Ukraine cease military action, change its constitution to enshrine neutrality, acknowledge Crimea as Russian territory, and recognize the separatist republics of Donetsk and Luhansk as independent states. This certainly looks like the softening of Putin's original position. The cessation of Ukrainian military action clearly isn't the same as complete demilitarization or denazification, with Zelensky's removal conspicuously absent from the list. There were also reports that Russian negotiators had instead proposed that Zelensky could stay as president, but Russia would appoint a new prime minister along his side. In response to these demands, on March 8th, Zelensky admitted that he had, quote, called on NATO membership, but rejected the idea that Ukraine ceded either Crimea or Donbass. Clearly, though, there's more space for agreement than we might initially thought, and Russia seems to have accepted that Zelensky, who's currently enjoying poll ratings of above 90%, isn't going anywhere, while Ukraine has apparently accepted that NATO membership isn't happening anytime soon. It's no coincidence that a few days later, on March 13th, Russian and Ukrainian negotiators reported there had been, quote, substantial progress in their talks. Nonetheless, though, there's still a lot to be agreed. For starters, the issue of Crimea and Donbass. Zelensky and other Ukrainian politicians have made it clear that they won't willingly cede any territory, despite the fact that Crimea and Donbass are now de facto under Russian control. There's also the issue of Ukrainian neutrality. While Zelensky might have given up on NATO membership, Ukraine has officially applied to join the EU, and the EU has made it clear that they expect Ukraine to join the bloc in the future. And it's hard to see how Putin could accept this, especially given the EU's muscular security policy. You've also got the third and perhaps most important issue of reparations. The Ukrainian Ministry for the Economy estimates that the war has incurred $120 billion worth of damages. Obviously, Russia is going to be unwilling to foot this bill, both because it makes Russia look culpable and because, well, the Russian state is pretty low on funds right now. So you get the point. Despite a superficial softening of positions on both sides, there's still some very crucial issues to work out. But even if the two sides do reach an agreement in principle, Ukraine will also require some way of guaranteeing that Putin actually keeps his word and doesn't just try another invasion in a few months or years. Again, it's difficult to see how this would actually work. Any guarantor would A, have to be trusted by both parties, and B, need to have sufficient leverage over Russia to deter them from any invasion. And it's not clear whether any of the current candidates for this mediation meet both of these criteria. Turkey and Israel are widely seen as the two frontrunners, but neither have sufficient leverage over Russia to truly deter Putin from violating the agreement. While China, which is perhaps the only country with sufficient leverage over Russia, might be perceived as a little too pro-Putin by Ukraine. Ultimately, the West is in a difficult spot, trying to respond appropriately, but not overreact and provoke Putin further. That's obviously an issue when it comes to the military conflict, but also economics. This conflict has hit Russia's economy hard, but the West is also incentivized to end things quickly in order to limit the economic hit globally. In fact, we discussed the expected economic impact on the global economy in another video, one that's available exclusively on Nebula, the streaming service my creator friends and I have teamed up to build, where we don't need to worry about demonetization or the algorithm. Over there you can find all of our latest videos ad-free, and we've also got a bunch of content available exclusively on Nebula, which will never come to YouTube. It's not just us either. All of our favourite educational creators are already there, like Wendover Productions, Real Life Law, Polymatter, Legal Eagle, Half as Interesting, and many others. But wait, we said this video was brought to you by CuriosityStream, right? Well, as a platform full of the best documentaries online, they naturally love educational creators like us. As such, we worked out a deal whereby if you sign up to CuriosityStream using the link in the description, you'll also get free access to Nebula. And that's not a free trial either. You'll get access as long as you're a member. To make things even better, for a limited time, they're offering a deal where you can get 26% off their already low price, making an entire year of both services less than $15. Less than $15 a year for all of your favorite educational creators, as well as superb documentaries on CuriosityStream. Signing up at curiositystream.com/TLDREU or clicking the link below not only gets you the deal, but it also directly supports TLDR and other educational content creators on the platform, as well as getting you original content and an ad-free experience.